This is the Parkinson's Fight Club, a podcast dedicated to empowering and inspiring those living with Parkinson's disease. I'm your host, Jamie Bryson. We are continuing my story this time, and we are joined once again by my wife, Christy. This will be the last episode where we're talking about me. I'm getting kind of tired of talking about myself, if I'm being honest. So we're looking forward to and excited to have some other folks on the podcast with us. Excited to hear some other people's stories as well as we move forward. So last episode, we ended with me being at the ER and being told that I had a mass on my kidney. And so then, as if, 2021 wasn't hard enough for us as a family, now we have this to deal with. And, we were sort of starting to settle in a little bit, maybe getting a little bit out of crisis mode when that happened. And it was kind of like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah. I remember thinking, this can't be real. This is not real. Like, he likes to tease me about things a lot of times, like say something completely off the wall.
No, I don't do that.
Yes, you do. And so I remember getting I think it was a text, like, you're not going to believe this, what they said. And then I guess you called me. I don't know. I don't remember exactly.
I think disbelief is actually literally how you felt.
So, yeah, I thought, like, for a minute, I thought, you're not telling the truth. Like, because sometimes you like to say things that are, like, not, that are like way too crazy and then come back to, like, something that, oh, no, actually, it's this. So, but I kept waiting for no, actually, it's this, and that didn't happen.
So what you're saying is I like to tell wild stories. No, I do like to try to catch you off guard and tell you things, but this was not one of those situations.
To the boys too.
Oh, I love doing it to the kids. Yeah. So this was not one of those situations, but I do think that even after I was like, yeah, and told you what happened, I think it was still like, you didn't completely believe, and I wasn't sure, but you definitely didn't believe that what was seen on that first CT scan was actually something to worry about. You thought it was a shadow.
Yeah, could it be a shadow? Like,
well, and it wasn't even a full scan because it cut off.
Yeah, because they were looking at your ribs and it just got like the top aspect of the kidney, and it was like, oh, there's this thing that looks like it's on the kidney. You should get like a full scan.
Yeah, like they literally didn't even get the full thing on the CT.
It just happened to be.
You saw the top part of it.
Little top part, so that just happened to be on the scan and just happened to be located in that part where they got. The image of when they were trying to image something else.
Yeah. And then, so there was no, they didn't do contrast with that CT either. So it was kind of just a plain one. And so there was some question for sure as to exactly what we were looking at, but the radiologist in the report definitely was concerned, that something was there that we needed to follow up with. So, I think you said at the end of the last episode that you got us an appointment pretty quickly with the urologist, and we went in to see him, and he was equally concerned, and so he sent us off for another CT, this time with contrast, to get a better picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it took a little bit of time to get the results on that. I feel like we had to kind of push to get feedback as to what the outcome of that was.
Well, I don't know if you remember this, because you didn't go with me to the scan, but you know how after you get a scan done or whatever, the radiologist isn't supposed to tell you anything. They're sitting there looking at the scans as they're coming in, and they're not the person who. Well, you mean
they're
tech.
A tech. Yeah, the radiology tech who does it. Yeah,
right. The person who's like actually there helping you and doing the deal, doing the whole thing. They're not supposed to tell you anything. So when I got done with the scan, I remember talking, she was a young girl, and she was, talking to me about it. And I was like, so, she asked me a couple questions like, so you had a previous CT that showed something? And I said, yeah. And I said what the radiologist who read the previous report said. And I said, they told me something like, that if this is really a tumor, that it would light up when they do the contrasts. And so I was like, so did it light up? Just seeing if I could get her to answer me. And she was like, well, I'm not really supposed to say anything. But thank God that you fell and hurt yourself on your bike and like when she said that, I was like, oh my God, she's literally telling me right now that I have a mass without telling me,
Yeah. And I should point out too that we found out later that these things are oftentimes what they call incidental findings, where you go in for one test or procedure and they're like, oh, they find this thing, especially with kidneys, because you had no symptoms like at all, like no pain, no anything else. Like there's no way you would have ever known that was there if it weren't for this incidental finding.
So, it was obvious that there was something there at that point. And then we go in to talk to the doctor, and the doctor says, well, we don't do biopsies in this situation because it just doesn't make any sense. A lot of times they're not accurate anyway, and it's very hard to get to, and it's pretty invasive just to get the sample.
If you're going to go in there, you might as well just take the whole thing.
Yeah. So he said, there's a 90% chance that this is cancerous. And so, my recommendation is to take it out.
Take it out. Yeah. So we had like this whole discussion, take it out on the way home. And I'm like, one of us was like, oh, who was it? Like, was it me that thought he meant take out the whole kidney? Or
you were definitely concerned about that, whether he
I'm
meant...
like, what does he mean by take? At first I thought, oh, he means take out the mass. I'm like, did he mean take out the whole kidney?
Yeah.
Was that me or you? I don't remember.
No, I think that was your concern. I interpreted it as he just wanted to take out the mass, and that did not necessarily mean I was going to have to lose my whole kidney. So I wasn't super worried about that. But I just remember your reaction was kind of like, I don't know if we should rush into this surgery and get this done. Like, it just seems like it's a very invasive surgery, and there's, risk involved. And I just remember saying, look, I have to get this out of me. I'm not going to live with this inside of me. It's not okay with me. It needs to go. And you were a little bit more hesitant than that.
Well, I mean, just given my past experience in lots of different hospitals and working with lots of different doctors and people having different opinions, and, us ourselves going to one facility, no, there's no way it's Parkinson's. The next doctor you see, it's absolutely this. And, getting the scan to confirm it. It's just, I'm just not one I'm a doubter anyway. So yeah. I don't just take what people say at face value, no matter what, credentials are behind your name. I need more information until I can come around to being accepting, I guess. So, you question all these things well, is he going to have to get in there and take out the whole kidney? Is he the right doctor for the job? How do we know his experience meets what your needs are? Is this guy qualified?
Mm-hmm.
Because he's getting all excited about, oh yeah, I do this major robotic surgery and we can do it right here at this, non-downtown type hospital, that's in more of a kind of a suburban part of North Dallas. Well, should we really be doing it there? Because, given my NICU experience, you have to be kind of a stable baby to be in some of those outlying facilities. Whereas if you have a major thing going on, you need to go to the big downtown facility where they have all the bells and whistles. Mm-hmm. So, I have all these things going through my head,
Well, your mama bear comes out, and, you forced me to, do a lot of research and make sure that this doctor was a good doctor. And, so I had to sort of go and make sure that we were working with the person who we should have been working with. And we got some really good recommendations from different people, including hospital staff, that said that he was great. He does those surgeries all the time, and did research on the different options in terms of how the surgery is done. And we knew that robotic was the best possible approach to
less
it.
Less invasive, yes. Better recovery time. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you're definitely, you're like the reins on me sometimes. I'm just gung ho, running into, all right, let's get this thing out. Let's get it out right now. And you're kind of whoa, buddy, let's make sure that this is the right situation, the right hospital, the right doctor, that, all of that. And so you definitely, make sure that we do our homework and stuff, which is really good.
Which can be hard if, you're out there fighting things on your own to have to deal with, living out the disease or the diagnosis, like not only like the Parkinson's, but then something else. Like I know a lot of people have, who have Parkinson's got COVID during that time and, trying to navigate all that. So I would say find someone who can be in your corner, because you trying to fight it on your own, you might not be in the right frame of mind to make decisions that need to be made. So always trying to find a support person, whether that's a spouse or a parent or, friend. Not that I'm like the perfect one, but I am pretty darn good since I have a nursing background. So
no, it's definitely good. So we scheduled the surgery, and we wanted to do it in December because you know how insurance is. I had already reached my out of pocket for the year, and we didn't want to go into 2022 because that would mean that we would probably owe a lot of money, and we knew we wouldn't owe anything if we got it done in December, which was not ideal because that meant we had to do it somewhere around Christmas time.
Literally 3 days before Christmas.
Yeah. So they got us in. I mean, at first they told us January, and then they had an opening, and it happened to be 2 to 3 days, December 22nd. And so that wasn't the most ideal situation.
It wasn't ideal at all.
Yeah.
From a family standpoint, and kids and Christmas.
But financially speaking, it made sense, and we knew we needed to get it out as soon as possible. And I just wanted to move on with my life.
Yeah, you didn't want to wait at all. Like January, no. Just even if cost, was something not factored in.
And the reality is too, with my job, with real estate, a lot of times things aren't very busy in December. So January can be a busier month for sure. So being that I'd already planned on having some time away, from work, I just thought, this will work out perfectly. So, but then somewhere in between when we went in and found out about the cancer or the mass, I should say, and when I actually went and got it done, I sort of decided that it was time for me to come out of hiding, because it was just a lot. It was a lot on us, and I just remember thinking, it's really stupid for you to be suffering by yourself, to be suffering alone. And so we had a conversation. I'm not as private of a person as you, for sure, but it just became a thing where I felt like, you know what, other people might be going through the same thing I'm going through in terms of Parkinson's or whatever, some other kind of diagnosis, cancer, whatever it is. Maybe I could help some people. Maybe I could, be an influence or an inspiration for people. So, I decided somewhere around early December to just go ahead and make a public announcement on social media that I had Parkinson's and that I was going to be having surgery to remove a mass.
Unrelated to Parkinson's.
Yeah, a completely unrelated situation. And then also around that time, I'd mentioned in the last episode that I was not happy with my doctor at the University Medical Center that we were going to, and he was leaving anyways. So I had to find a new doctor, and I just wasn't happy with my care. And I remember talking to my therapist, who I will have on the show sometime soon, hopefully. And she just really encouraged me. Like, she asked me the question, "Are you willing to travel?" And I said, "Absolutely." She said, "Are you willing to travel to find the right person, the right doctor?"
It's like, if you could pick any healthcare scenario, like what would your ideal choice be? And you said, well, the Mayo Clinic.
Well, I mean,
it took some thought.
If I'm being 100% honest, I didn't know anything about the Mayo Clinic other than I knew it was a famous hospital. And I knew there were other ones too out there that were similar, but that was definitely the one that came to mind first for whatever reason. And I hadn't done any research into this, like in terms of how good is the neurology department at Mayo Clinic. I just knew that it was a renowned hospital, and that, hey, I went on their website and they had an application to apply to go there. And so I just filled it out.
Yeah. I mean, and I know from being in healthcare that their approach is different. A lot of places are pushing towards patient-centered care, family-centered care, where, the person is treated like a whole person and not just a set of symptoms, but your whole psychological, social, emotional, physical, all being combined and treating the whole person. But Mayo Clinic's really a lot about that. So I thought, well, maybe, if they have a good neurology, I mean, I'm sure they had something, at least a start to see if you could get in.
Yeah.
It was worth a try.
At that point, I was thinking I'd probably be applying to multiple places. So I did that application, and then that was actually in the middle of November when I did that application. And then we found out in the middle of December that I got accepted, and they scheduled me an appointment for February. So that was kind of all going on at the same time. I was excited about the Mayo Clinic and everything, but I needed to get past this surgery. So the day first surgery came around. I know you were super scared. I was definitely, I was scared. Cancer is like a completely different animal than Parkinson's. With cancer, it can be deadly. I mean, it can be fatal.
Mm-hmm.
Parkinson's is not a fatal disease. So, that was a huge difference for me in terms of how I was dealing with that. Was I was pretty sure based on the scans that there wasn't any other cancer around it. So I felt okay about that it hadn't metastasized. But, it's nerve-wracking to know that there's something inside of you that is not supposed to be there. And it makes you wonder how bad it is and what's going to happen and all that. And then, of course, going under anesthesia and having a major abdominal surgery, I mean, things go wrong sometimes and with routine surgery. So, yeah, it was a little scary.
Yeah, it was a lot scary. I mean, the doctor seemed good, but as far as like personality-wise, he was not super personable.
He was such a surgeon.
So, I can appreciate that. So well, he must be a really good surgeon because he doesn't have a great personality. So, yeah. Not that there can't be surgeons with good personalities, but I perceived him to be pretty highly intelligent and not super.
He's a great surgeon.
Super friendly.
But he knew that about himself.
But,
right?
A lot of times people think someone's a good doctor based on if they're friendly or not. So, but yeah, it was a lot to entrust, to go under anesthesia and trust that you're going to come out on the other side. And, it was a major big deal. Went through your abdomen, 5 probes, and they have to go through top down to get to your kidney.
Yep.
Take this out. And, and then I'm thinking stress on the body. Like they've done a lot of, investigation into stress and Parkinson's and how it can exacerbate symptoms. And so, physiological stress like that, they didn't get his medicine right. And, he takes it orally but you're not eating. And, it's all this whole spectrum of things that you have to work together between diet and exercise and medication and stuff. So if you're not eating and your body's under stress and you can't take the dosage orally, all these things, is it going to make that worse? Are you going to be shaking on the table, when they're trying to cut this thing out? And, so
I think you were, you were worried that I wasn't going to make it out of the surgery. I think, because that's just something
that's just how I am.
Yeah.
We had a kid who had a tonsillectomy and I was the same way because I put it off for some time thinking that maybe that's not what he needed.
It's always it's the worst case scenario, right? So I take inspiration from a lot of different sources or a few different main sources that I'm excited to share with you guys as we, go along. But there was one in particular that really helped me get through that situation. I remember being in the room that you go into before the OR where they put your IV in. And the anesthesiologists come in and talk to you and all that stuff. And the week of the surgery, I happened to be watching Netflix. There's actually a documentary on Netflix called Nothing is Impossible. 14 Peaks, Nothing is Impossible. And the guy that this is about, his name is Nims Purja, and he is just some incredible human being, who has climbed the world's tallest mountains in the shortest amount of time, 14 of them, and which included Mount Everest and K2 and, the most formidable mountains on the planet. And I was watching that documentary and I was super inspired by him. And I just remember this one scene where he's talking to a bunch of climbers that are about to go up Everest. And he said something to them about, sometimes you feel like you're screwed. And he didn't use that word, but we're trying to be PC on the show. But sometimes you feel like you're screwed, but you're actually not screwed. You're only about 45% screwed. And it's funny. And I laughed at the time, but it's like, that really stuck with me. It's like, I'm sitting there and I ended up talking to the anesthesiologist about that. And he was like, oh, I love that. I loved Nims Purja. His book's coming out. And then I remember him saying 45%. Like he knew, like he said that to me. And I was like, whoa, like that's crazy. So that really helped me get through. It's like, you think that things are just really, really bad, but it's like, no, it's only about 45% bad.
Yeah, because didn't he tell a story about how he himself had like fallen off a roof and had a shoulder injury or something?
Remember
that? Yeah.
And he thought he wasn't going to be able to
be back in practice and all that kind of stuff, and how he recovered. And, so he was like, he really, I don't know, he was like the right person to be there at the right
awesome.
time.
Yeah, that really helped me a lot. So the surgery went well. We don't have to go into all the details of that, but stayed 2 nights in the hospital. Everything seemed fine. I guess I passed with flying colors, and then I greatly underestimated how bad or how hard the recovery was going to be for that. So like I literally couldn't stand up. I couldn't sit down. I couldn't lay down. I couldn't do anything just because my abs, my abdomen hurt so bad. It was like, it felt like somebody was ripping my abs open.
Yeah, I mean, it's major trauma through all those layers of muscle.
Yeah, I mean, they literally had to cut through my abs to get to it. And so yeah, that was rough.
Yeah, I mean, it was, sleeping was hard, eating was hard, moving was hard.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you're in that space where you're just living like moment to moment, like night to day to get through.
And honestly, I don't remember Parkinson's really bothering me that much during that period. It was like, I mean, I was taking my meds, but, I was taking Ritari and everything, but like, I don't remember having breakthrough symptoms or anything like that. Cause I was just so, I don't know. My body was just,
I don't know. It was strange kind of, because I had anticipated that was going to get a lot worse.
Yeah.
And really hard to manage both simultaneously, but, it's like it masked itself for a little while or something, which
it's like it gave me a break.
It doesn't make sense, but yeah, I don't know. I still don't understand why that was like that, but as soon as you got better.
Well, it's we're like a week into it maybe, and I started getting this really bad headache, and I ended up with a fever, and my fever was only about 99, so it wasn't like really crazy, but I'm like, my mind's going all over the place. Like, what's going on? Why do I have a fever? And I'm like, oh crap. I mentioned in the last episode that I have a primary immune deficiency, which means that my body doesn't fight infection like it should. So I immediately jumped to, oh my goodness, I have an infection. No. I thought I was getting an infection from the surgery.
Oh yeah.
Like I was super, and I mean, they put me on antibiotics, I'm pretty sure, to start with, prophylactically, but, that was my main concern. I'm like, I got a fever, and I'm looking down at, and they didn't actually put any stitches in my incisions. It was just glue, which is something I never experienced before, but it worked. But there were a couple of them that looked kind of like whitish, like there was some discharge, and not to make you guys grossed out or whatever, but I was concerned. So we went to the doctor because I told him about that, and he looked at everything. He said, oh, you're totally fine. And the 99 fever is probably nothing. He thought maybe it was just a upper respiratory infection, like a sinus infection or something.
Yeah, I don't know. But he had some significant bruising, like on the lateral side.
Yes.
I knew. And I was like, this bruising doesn't look normal. Like I was getting concerned about like internal bleeding.
Like my whole side was like black.
I mean, it was really black, but
yeah.
It was like, it seemed like it was getting worse. It's like, yeah. See, it gets
like,
worse.
Yeah, that's normal. It's, yeah.
Yeah.
Just
kind of brushed it off, and I was like, I don't know that's, I don't know. It didn't sit right with
So
me at that point. But
well, we go home and a couple more days go by and Christy gets sick. And Christy doesn't get sick very often. So Christy's like, oh my gosh, I feel like I have the flu or something. And we were like,
yeah, it was like New Year's Eve, I think.
Oh yeah, it was New Year's Eve. So that would have been a little over a week. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I'm going to take a COVID test because we had some COVID tests at home. And I mean to tell you that thing turned positive like within 30 seconds or something crazy like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was quick.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, I have COVID. And I was like, oh shoot, that's what's wrong with me. That's why I have, that's why I have this headache.
But you had it before. It was several days before.
Yeah, I got it before you. Yeah. And I was coughing and like, y'all.
We didn't even think of that.
Coughing with like holes in your abdomen is like awful. The absolute worst. Like that doesn't even do it justice. Like it was like horrible. And luckily, I mean, I didn't cough a ton. I mean, I was coughing a little bit, but I felt terrible and I was like, man, okay, well, I guess I have COVID.
Yeah.
So it was like, cool. So yeah, first Parkinson's, then mass on my kidney, then COVID. Okay, what's next?
And I think this was like the Omicron period. So it wasn't like super severe.
It was, I'm pretty sure we had Omicron.
Yeah. So I don't know which one it was, but
yeah, we don't know.
I think we kind of may have had it like in 2020 early on because we went to Disney World and all came back sick. And then the pediatrician, I remember her saying something about, oh yeah, the flu season's been really long this year because, started early or something. And, come to find out, COVID emerged, a couple of months after that. So I'm pretty sure we had it before, but this go around was, our first official testing with it and such. But
so guys, I got over COVID and it was just off into the sunset. Everything was perfect. Everything was great.
Not hardly.
Except not. So the next shoe to drop, I mean, I think we're running out of shoes at this point. I mean, I didn't know you could have more than two, but I was at home one day. I don't even know how much time had passed. Maybe another week. It was early. It was
like January 8th, I think.
Yeah, it was definitely early January. And well, I went to the bathroom and my urine had blood in it. And not just a little bit of blood, but a lot of blood. And we were like,
this week time is like about 2.5 weeks post procedure. So it's like,
it's been a while. Yeah.
Close to 3 weeks.
Yeah, it had been a while. And so I just, it was like a Saturday night and I'm like, I guess I need to call the doctor. So I call the doctor, you go through their prompts to the, on-call doctor, leave a message, all that jazz, So I leave a message on there and I hang up and I'm telling you, it was maybe a minute later, my phone rang and it was him. It was my doctor, my urologist. He goes, you need to go to the ER like right now.
Yeah. Same guy who was like, oh, don't worry about that giant bruise on your side. That's normal.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if he's concerned, it's like, and I remember I was out like, cause I felt like I needed to go out and do something. And sometimes I go do some retail therapy or something.
Yeah.
So I had just made it out. Like hadn't been going places, very much. And cause had been sick and all that. But,
you were trying to get out of the house cause you needed to get out.
Yeah. One of the kids was like wanting to go to Starbucks. I had one of them with me and I'm like, well, nope, got to go home. Dad's having a problem. So
yeah, we go to the ER and I could do a whole episode on this experience, but, I'll just kind of briefly go through the highlights. Of course, the ER waiting room was full of people and we go in there and, we check in and the lady says, okay, we got to do your COVID screening. Have you been in contact with anyone who has COVID? I said, I have COVID. And she goes, oh.
No, we said something about like we had it a couple weeks ago or something.
No, sorry. Yeah, like I literally.
Like a week. Yeah. Well, we had it. Yeah.
Yeah, I just had it or whatever I said. And she was like, "Oh, okay," but I knew I was going to I knew I would test positive. I just knew I would
because like people weren't really understanding how long you actually test positive for it.
I'm almost positive that. Did you take the kids to the pediatrician?
Yeah,
and they tested
both
positive
of their
like 2
birthdays
weeks
are
later
like
or something?
November and December, and so I always do their annual checks in January. and I had taken them around that time period, and maybe it was shortly after.
No, I think we knew that people were testing positive for like a month. We knew that somehow.
Well, we were starting to hear,
yeah,
starting to hear that because, the school thing was like, if you test positive, you can't come back until it's like 2 weeks or a negative test. But then people were testing positive longer than 2 weeks. And so then it was like 5 days symptom free. So it was all during that time when the rules were changing and nobody knew the rules. Nobody was following the rules.
I wasn't sick. At that point, I was sick. At that point, I was okay. But I just knew that if they tested me, I would probably test positive. And so I was a little bit worried about what that might mean. But anyway, we waited in the ER for a long time because they did my vitals, and my vitals were totally normal. Like who actually has an internal bleed and has normal vitals? Well, I guess I do. And so that, how they are there. It's like, oh, he's not dying. So we're just going to let him sit out there for hours. And so then there was a shift change, and I went to the new person and I was like, hey, my doctor called ahead and I've been sitting here for a while. I'm bleeding, I think. And she was like,
call ahead seating and our reservation hasn't been called yet.
And she was like, what? And so that nurse got me back there quickly.
You're like, I'm supposed to be a direct admit, which I guess it wasn't communicated clearly. But they have been swamped for so much time and short-staffed. And
there was a lot of COVID patients in there. And so anyway, we get back there and they order a CT, obviously. They want to see what's going on. So they do the CT, and then we waited forever and ever to get somebody to tell us the results of the CT because apparently the ER doctor was in a trauma. And, I was just kind of sitting there and in the ER forever and ever. And finally, the nurse comes in and says, all right, well, I'm just going to tell you what the radiologist report says. And she goes, you have a hematoma in your abdomen that's, I think, 14 centimeters is what I remember.
I don't even remember.
It was a lot. It was huge.
It was big.
Yeah. And, oh, by the way, this is going to throw a monkey wrench in all of this. And we're like, what? She goes, you have COVID pneummonia.
Yeah, it looked like ground glass appearance, which is what COVID pneumonia looks like on scans. Yeah.
So anyway, they're like, you're going to have to go to the COVID floor because you clearly have, they also swabbed me, which was positive, but they want to take me to the COVID floor, and they tell her she has to leave because, the COVID protocols that the hospitals had. And so she was super, super mad about that. She did not want to leave me there, which I understand. And I didn't want her to leave either, but it's like, what are we going to do? How, we can't fight them. They're not going to let this happen. So they made her leave, and they took me up to a room, and I was on the COVID floor, and it was weird. And I was kind of like by myself, obviously. And the nurse was like, we don't really know what to do with you because you have COVID, but like your breathing is normal.
You don't have any symptoms, don't need any oxygen.
You can do whatever you can. She's like, if you had COVID, I would make you sleep on your stomach, but you can sleep however you want. So anyways, the next day, I wake up and I'm just kind of chilling. Don't really know anything at this point. Nobody told me anything.
They had said in the ER that you need to, they're contacting interventional radiology, but since it's not like emergent, they're just going to come in the morning.
Yes.
Might be doing a procedure.
It was a Saturday night. So like we're not going to call anybody in because you don't need anything. It's not something that needs to happen right now.
It's urgent, but not emergent. Yeah.
So they ended up, doing a procedure on me where they did a catheter into my femoral artery and snaked it around to my artery in my kidney and found a leak there. And they had to put, I think, three coils.
Yeah.
So they put these little metal coils in my renal artery.
Yeah, to seal off the bleed.
To seal it off, which I was actually really thankful because I was like scared to death. Like, I'm not even kidding. I was scared to death that they were going to cut me open again. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I'm just now starting to feel a little bit better from this surgery that I already had. So I'm like, sweet. All it is like a small incision in my leg, and it's not going to be a big recovery time. And I was like happy about that. So the procedure, I was awake for the whole thing, by the way. That was super weird. I think they gave me some Ativan or something, but I was awake for it. And that was weird. And then they took me back to my room. Christy got to come at some point, but it was maybe an hour or two. Some time had passed since they did that procedure. And I just started having the absolute worst pain that you can imagine. in my kidney.
I mean, it wasn't super painful before. Like,
No.
it was just the bleeding.
I had no pain. Like, I mean, I had no kidney pain. I just had
Right.
pain from the incisions trying to heal.
Right.
So I just
Not this pain.
awful
Post-procedure
pain. Like my back, I could feel it in my back and in my stomach. Like it was like clearly my kidney. And so they had to give me like some really serious like intravenous pain meds. Dilaudid, I think, is what they gave me.
I don't remember.
And like I'm like, this went on for at least 12 hours where I was just like, every time it was time for another dose, I was like hitting the button. Like I need some more pain meds because it hurt. And I was like, why is this hurting? You know, I asked the nurse and she's like, oh, well, you just had a procedure done. Like, I'm like,
yeah,
okay. So the doctor comes in though, like the next day, the actual surgeon that did my original surgery. And he comes in and I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. But like, why does this hurt so bad? He's like, oh, it's probably because part of your kidney's dying.
I was like, oh, awesome.
Like, okay.
Like, right. Well, first off, we weren't really told that this was a potential complication. So, you know, after the fact, it's like, oh, there's a small percentage, like what, 10% of people who have this bleeding complication. But that wasn't even on the horizon for us. It's like, you know, we had no, and it wasn't on the paper that we signed, like potential risk factors when you're having the, you know, the pre-op and it wasn't at all mentioned, you know, and so this just kind of came out of nowhere as far as we were concerned. And, you know, after you get out of the first week, you think, okay, well, I just got to heal and recover and everything's going to be fine. And, you know, it's like, oh, you know, like the ER doctor that night was like, okay, you're probably going to have an interventional radiologist. I remember you just being like, people showed up like, hey, we're here for your procedure. You're like, oh, I didn't know I was having that for sure. Like I hadn't
given consent.
I haven't signed a consent. Mm-mm. Like, you know, so you always have to just like push people to get the information, you know, and like we're pushers. And so I can't even imagine people who, you know, just trust that everybody, you know, is taking the right care that you need.
Yeah.
But,
well, you, like I said, the mama bear comes out of you and then the bulldog comes out of you too. Cause man, you like, if you're not happy about something, you're getting in somebody's face about it. But, she really wanted me out of that hospital that like as soon as possible. So she sort of pushed them to wean me off of that medication, even though I didn't want to do that because I was in so much pain.
Well, first off, they were like, you know,
they want to keep me another night.
Yeah, well, you couldn't. They were like, oh, you can't really be here this long. The visiting hours are like 2 hours. I'm like, well, I'm not leaving. So yeah, you know, I mean, I did, you know, go home overnight, but
they did let you stay. They let you stay for a long time that day. Yeah. But then the next day, they wanted to keep me another day, and you were like, no, we're going home.
Well, because that night, you kept getting IV pain meds all night, and in the morning, that rounding attending was like, oh, well, you know, you got IV pain meds throughout the night. You know, you can't really go home. You know, you have to transition
they weren't gonna let me go home.
To oral medication. I'm like, you got IV pain meds because they didn't like do their due diligence to get you switched over. They just did the easy thing, and you had that ordered and just gave it to you, you know, instead of being like, well, the best thing to do to get you out of here, you know, is to switch you over and try, you know, but this happens a lot of times at nights. Mm-hmm. It's just like, oh, well, there's a attending on call. I don't want to call them to get, you know, the pain meds switched to something oral. Like they leave well enough alone, which is not good for the patient, you know, because the patient needs to be home, you know, ASAP, mm-hmm. you know, not to mention how much it costs for another day in the hospital. That's unnecessary. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was not about staying another night.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it all turned out really well. I'm glad that you pushed to get me home.
I said, if I have to take this IV out, I mean, I was there ripping the tape off the IV and being like, he's getting up to the shower.
She started taking the leads off of my abdomen and everything.
And so that nurse, I know, poor thing, I was like kind of freaking her out. I'm like, there's nothing going on here that I can't take care of at home, you know?
Yeah.
So you need to get those discharge orders right now.
Yeah. So we got out of that. We got through that. Everything, you know, everything was fine. I mean, it took a while for all of that to clear out in terms of like the blood that I had coming out in my urine, but it eventually went away, thankfully. And during January, it was kind of like a moment where I was like, okay, I got to fight back. Like I got to have something to shoot for here. Like I got to have some goal, you know. So I had been signed up to do the Ironman 70.3 race in Galveston, Texas. the year before, but it was canceled. Actually, I was supposed to do it in 2020, and it got canceled in 2021. I deferred because of Parkinson's, because I was in the middle of that whole thing.
Early on, yeah.
Yeah. And so I'd said, you know what? I'm not deferring again. I mean, I could have probably. I could have called him and said, hey, I can't do, and this, mind you, like this is like mid-January, and that race is the first weekend of April. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not putting it off anymore. And I just went ahead and emailed him. I said, hey, I want to go ahead and do it this year. And so, I got my full entry signed up and everything. And people were like, you're crazy, dude. You just had all this surgery and you just had all this, and you're going to go do Ironman 70.3. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do it. So in between there, like early February was when we had to go to the Mayo Clinic. Mm-hmm. And so I cannot overstate to you guys how life-changing going to the Mayo Clinic was for me and for Christy, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I was still in that mode of just sort of floundering, like what's next? What's going to happen? Am I going to be able to, I mean, I just still felt like I was probably going to not be able to do the things that I like to do for a long period of time. I just, and I still hadn't really found a doctor that I liked very much. And so I was just in that state where it's just like, I don't know what's next. I don't know how this is going to go, just a lot of fear. I mean, I would say I had a lot of fear. I didn't have a lot of hope at that point in terms of my long-term prognosis. And so.
Well, there were a lot of things, and I mean, hope keeps you going, but sometimes hope is hard to find, and especially when you're like hit with neurodegenerative disease and, doctors who don't see you, and then cancer and surgery and COVID and bleeding and rehospitalization. It's like
a lot.
How can all this happen? Like we hadn't even caught up mentally with all the trauma that we were going through. And so I think we're both just hanging on for okay, well, I hope this is good, but I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I remember going to the Mayo Clinic and trying not to get my hopes up.
Right.
I remember thinking, this may not be our final destination. Right. We may come here and then maybe next time we'll go to, some other hospital. I was thinking about maybe going to California to UCF. University of California, San Francisco, UCFSF. Mm-hmm. Sorry. Because they have a really great neurology department there that I had heard about. But anyway,
we're all pretty new at this, so you're having to deal with the disease and figure out advocacy for yourself and deal with your own trauma. And so there's not words. And I think in the English language to even encompass how all consuming, your life just was going along one way. And it was just, you hit a major roadblock and then flew off into the ditch somewhere, and you don't know how to get yourself out of it necessarily. And you just try to do the things that you know how to do and hopefully, pull yourself back up.
So the cool thing about Mayo is that they tell you that they want you to be there for a whole week if you're not from around there, because they want to do a bunch
vacation.
Yeah. It's like a medical vacation that you and I went on, which happened to be the very first time that we were able to go somewhere by ourselves without the kids.
Super sad.
Since we've been married, we got to spend an entire
14 years.
Yeah, we got to spend an entire week together, just you and me. Obviously, we weren't on some beach sipping Mai Tais or whatever.
We're going to make up for it this year, though.
Yeah, hopefully. No, I mean, yeah, we are. But, we showed up and, like I said, didn't have a lot of expectations. And I met with Dr. Savica. He's my doctor at Mayo. And we sat down with him. And from the get-go, it was like, this guy is awesome. I felt seen immediately by him.
Gets me.
Yeah. I mean, we found out right away pretty much that he's the only doctor in the United States that actually specializes in YOPD and young onset Parkinson's disease. And I had no idea about this before I applied.
We had no clue that he's like the world's, like, the country's leading expert on young onset. Like,
yeah.
To be, thought of as a different disease than late onset.
Yeah. And he's got a lot of sort of, I don't know if you would call them progressive ideas, but he has some ideas about YOPD that I'd never heard before. And I don't think there's not anybody out there that I know of that are saying some of the things that he says about YOPD. But basically, he spent 2 hours with us that first day.
And he's like, a researcher and a professor and teacher. Like, this is a busy guy. Like this, I mean, he, we think we're all busy in our life, but this guy's like, doing, writing articles and books and teaching and seeing patients and like really motivated and happy to do it. Like, treated us like we were something special. Yeah.
Like he sat there with us and talked. I'm telling you, he talked for 2 hours with us. And I just remember him saying things like, "You're going to die as an old man. You're going to be around as long as as long as anyone else that doesn't have Parkinson's, and you're not, you're not like
join the support groups."
Yeah. Don't join the support groups.
Don't go to any support groups, which I thought was weird. Like, oh, we don't need support groups. Like, I didn't really understand what he meant at first.
Well, I kind of knew what he meant because I knew a lot of those groups were very negative.
Doom and gloom.
Yes. Yeah. Very like,
complainers.
Yeah. Just really depressing. And a lot of times he was saying, you're not like an older person that gets Parkinson's because you're a young onset person, and Parkinson's is different for you than it is in an older person. So don't compare yourself to those people and how their disease progresses and how their disease acts, because yours is completely different.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just, it just gave us a whole lot of hope. They did a bunch of tests on me while we were there. Really didn't do much but rule out a bunch of things, I think, at this point.
Blood work, exams, tests, scans, PET scan.
Did a PET scan, did an autonomic system
reflex test
on me. And so we got a better idea of kind of the scope of my Parkinson's while we were there, which was good. And then, when I left there and I talked to him about triathlon and mountain biking and everything. And he was like, yeah, you can totally do all of that. He said, we can help you. We'll support you and whatever you need. And he said, look, I'm going to give you a plan before, I'm going to give you a medication plan so that when you do that race in April, that you will be ready for that. And you'll know what you need to do in terms of medicine to make sure you can get through that day without having like an off time, which Parkinson's people, that's like when your medicine's not working. And so we came up with a plan, and, I showed up at that race in April and I implemented that plan. So for those of you that don't know what a 70.3 is, it's a 1.2 mile swim. It's a 56 mile bike and a half marathon. So back to back, right? So I showed up with 6 weeks of training, maybe. And, I did it. I did that race, and I ended up finishing, with a time that was about 15 minutes slower than the previous time I had at that same race, which actually blew my mind, that I was even able to do that. But I just remember, I had emotions throughout the whole process of everything we went through during the course of that year, but it was like almost exactly 1 year later from when I got the Parkinson's diagnosis that I showed up in Galveston and did that race. And, I think I was probably it was probably a good mile from the finish. And I was doing like some walk run kind of thing because my legs were just completely dead. And I was with a friend in the triathlon community, and she was with me, and we were trying to keep each other going. And I just remember all of a sudden, I was like a mile from the finish line, and I just started crying uncontrollably. And that's not like, I don't do that kind of stuff.
No, which
typically.
is interesting too, because you had done full Ironmans before. I think your first one was back in 2017, and
yep.
Then you did another one in 2019, I think.
Yep.
So it wasn't really so much about the distance, but it's the overcoming piece. And so I just take that as it doesn't really matter what you do, just as long as you get out there and do something to show yourself that you can, like, do it because you can. Because I feel like that was like your most meaningful experience based on what you had done. I mean, not that the fulls are really long, but and definitely something to accomplish. But this accomplishment was something different for you.
Yeah, and we can throw some pictures up on the YouTube video for those of you watching on YouTube. But I was just overcome with emotion and cried at the finish line. And I remember hugging some of my friends from my tri club, the Frisco Tri Club, shout out. And I was just like, man, I've been through so much. And, you know, they were all crying with me too. It was a really cool scene. And they were all, you know, we're so proud of you. And I was trying to like describe what that emotion was for me. And I think it was just gratitude. It was just, I just was so thankful in that moment that even though I had basically been through hell and everything that we went through in 2021, even after all of that, I was still able to do an Ironman 70.3 and finish it, you know, with a time that was way faster than a lot of people, you know? I mean, it's not like I was near the bottom, you know, like 6.5 hours is a pretty good time for anyone. So, you know, I was just like, wow, you know, I was just, it was crazy. And, but then I was really like, man, you know, I told my doctor, told Dr. Savica that I was going to do that. And he's like, let me know how it goes, you know? And so I let him know. And
it wasn't just like let me know how that goes kind of thing, you know, that people say, like, this guy is so sincere. Like, he's so genuine.
Cool. Yeah.
Like, he really wanted to know, like, please email me, you know. And you think this guy who is such a big deal, it like takes interest in, you know, my success, and like not just like a little interest, like really, you know, invested.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and he was like, I'm going to tell this story to our PR people. And so then the Mayo Clinic wanted to interview me. They did a virtual interview and ended up posting that interview on all their socials. And then after that, it was like, oh, well, this got so much attention that we want to do a news story. We want to get with the media. And so there ended up being a news story, which you guys can find on YouTube. I have a copy of it on my Facebook, on the Fight Club Facebook. The Fight Club YouTube channel. You can find that video there, or you can just search it. I don't know. I guess you would search for Salina triathlete, but you'll be able to find it. Triathlete with Parkinson's is probably a good search. You would probably find it if you did that. But what was
WFAA?
Yeah, it was ABC Dallas, WFAA.
Yeah, ABC affiliate.
Yeah. So that was awesome. But what I was going to say is, you know, like the Mayo Clinic gave me hope, and that hope really pushed me forward and changed my outlook. And then what I was doing and what happened at that 70.3 was that, like, that hope got converted into belief, because it was like I was hoping that I was going to be okay, and that hope really propelled me forward. But like finishing that race and all the training that I did leading up to it, like that's not hope anymore, right? That's like, now I believe I can do that because I did it. And so that's huge. And then, you know, during that time frame, actually, I guess if we back to January, I had a goal of competing in the Leadville 100 mountain bike race, the race across the sky, as
Colorado,
they call it.
Yeah.
And that's something that I had been thinking about doing for years. And so I was like, you know what, you know, during that time where I was like, I need some goals to go after. I need something to push me, you know. And so I ended up raising money for the Livestrong Foundation, which is a cancer organization.
Because you can't just sign up for Leadville. Like, there's entries and you have to do.
There's a lottery. Yeah.
Well, and there's, you know, you can do some other races to get an entry. Maybe
you can qualify for it.
Qualifier races, but I'm not that fast. So and then
you have to finish like top two.
It's not something that you can just be, I'm signing up for Leadville. You know, it's like it's a process to even get.
Yeah, it's hard to get
chosen, you know. And so I remember being like, I don't know if this is the right time, you know. So it's like, even though you have all these high moments, like, you still have that self-doubt in there, like creeping its head up, no matter who you are and what you've been through. So you have to fight against that.
And you pushed me.
Yeah,
you're like, sign up for it.
And I'm not like that.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, do it. Because I told her, I was like, I can get an entry through Livestrong. She's like, do it.
Oh, yeah. Because there were only a couple spots left at that point, even through Livestrong. Like, I don't know. You got to raise money. And who's going to donate to me? I'm like, people will donate. People are going to show up for you, you know?
Yeah. So I ended up raising all the money I needed to raise in like a week.
It was like 3 days.
Yeah, it was like really short. So my friends are awesome. They all just chipped in and showed up and put a bunch of money into it. So then I had that going for me. After the 70.3 was over last year, I really focused on trying to do well at that mountain bike race, which was in August. So, you know, things didn't work out as well as I wanted to at Leadville. And it wasn't because of Parkinson's. It was just, you know, it's a really, really, really hard race. Like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Well, yeah. And we live like a lot lower.
Yeah. And it's at altitude, like 12,000 feet. And the altitude kicked my butt. But
it's like almost the highest point. Used to be the highest point in Colorado. I think
it was the highest it was the highest city in Colorado.
Until recently.
There's another one. Yeah.
Alma, I think is now.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's right.
But literally, like, it's like literally like we've been trying to fight like what seemed like a mountain. And then I just remember writing something about like taking on the literal mountain, like just seems so right. You know, and sometimes you finish strong.
Well, I started using the hashtag keep climbing.
Yeah.
Because for me, I just had this visual in my head of when I got Parkinson's, when I found out I had Parkinson's, that I was like, oh, I'm going to just be going downhill from here. And I thought, no, I'm going to go uphill, you know? And so Leadville seemed like the perfect sort of way to try to go uphill, because it literally, there's like 13,000 feet of climbing over 100 miles of mountain biking. And it's crazy hard and it's beautiful. The mountains, I love Colorado, and we got to go to Colorado a couple times last year for me to do some training. Well, we went in June for me to train a little bit, but we'll be back. It didn't work out. I didn't end up finishing it.
I think you did great. I mean, you did. So there's times you have to make certain time cutoffs in order to keep going, because like for safety, if you don't make certain checkpoints at a certain time, you know, you're not going to finish in a reasonable amount of time. So I missed the time cut at barely at mile 40, at the 40 mile, but it was because I had super, super bad cramps, like really bad cramps, and they just would not go away. And so the altitude will have to be something we have to figure out in the future.
And I think I also didn't have nutrition as well figured out as I do now. So,
but the experience was totally worth it.
So here's what I'll say. I mean, ultimately, I'm still pursuing my goals. I'm still, pursuing my dreams. And I do believe that my best days are ahead. It took me a while to get to that point where I really could believe that, but I believe it now. And I want to conclude kind of my final thoughts on all of this with, I believe that my experience in Ironman and just doing really difficult endurance races was very helpful for me in equipping me to deal with everything that I dealt with. Because
resilience,
I think doing things like that teach you grit and resilience. And I think that, we really have to do we need to do hard things, because if we don't, we need to take the hard road when we don't necessarily have to, because when life makes you take the hard road and you haven't been ever taken the hard roads before, then it's going to be super hard for you. So I really encourage, everybody, and this is kind of how we treat our kids too, is like, you have to do hard things in life because life is hard and you're going to encounter things that are really difficult. And you need to do the best that you can to prepare yourself for that, because grit is like a muscle. I've heard it said that way. And so, throughout an Ironman, I was out there for 12 hours and 45 minutes in my first one, and ended up with a knee injury 6 miles into the marathon and was in extreme pain for 20 miles basically. But you have highs and lows throughout that race where there's one minute where you may be like, oh, I'm going to quit. This is awful. I can't do this. And then the next minute you're like, on cloud 9. Like I'm crushing it. And it's just, you just got to know that that's how it's going to be. And that's how it is with Parkinson's. I mean, I think that's a really good way to say how I equate my experience with endurance sports and my life. It's just like, you just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other, one foot in front of the other. I mean, that's the secret to it. And
just even when you don't feel like it, even when it's like not appealing or it's raining or, you know, it's not something that you want to do like at all. Mm-hmm. And I mean, honestly, I have problems with that. I have problems even getting on the Peloton, but that's, you know. Well, everybody, I mean, that's why I feel bad for people who basically are told when they get a Parkinson's diagnosis, hey, you need to be exercising, when a lot of those people have never, like, well, maybe they haven't never, but at the time they're not exercising regularly. And it's like, that's a whole added thing that you have to put. Getting started is hard.
It is. So that pretty much wraps up my story. So for future episodes, we will be talking to other Parkies or people with Parkinson's and professionals, telling stories. That's what we want to do, is we want to tell stories. We want to find inspiration. I find inspiration from you guys, from all of the Parkinson's community, people that I know through social media. I mean, you guys are awesome. I hope that I can inspire you guys, but you guys inspire me too. And I'm really looking forward to telling some other people's stories on here and just getting some professionals to come on and join us and talk about lifestyle stuff, mostly just, you know, how can we fight this disease? Like, what's the best way to do that? And so that's really what we're going to focus on. So I'm really looking forward to getting some of these people in and on the show. If you know anybody who you really think should be on the show, please let me know. Please send me a message through the Facebook group. You could just post in the Facebook group. And then you can email me at jamie@theparkinsonsfightclub.com. And please follow me on Instagram, which you can find me on Instagram at Pedals with Parkinson's, at Pedals with Parkinson's. So hit me up somehow, some way. Let me know, hey, this is a really awesome person that you really need to talk to. Would love to do that. And I mean, hey, tell me your story. I want to know your story. So looking forward to connecting with you guys and looking forward to our future episodes. Stay tuned to find out who's going to be with me next. Thanks a lot.